The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The further you take my rights away.
Good evening. It's so nice to be with you. We're at M Shed in Bristol this evening, where they record the history of our amazing city. And right in the middle, the prime exhibit, is this wonderful Bristol bus. This one is 1966. It's painted green, the colours of the old Bristol Omnibus Company. But 3 years before this beast took to the road, there was one qualification you needed to be a driver or a conductor on a bus like this. And that was you had to be white. And one man, Paul Stephenson, decided that that could not be allowed to stand.
Paul Stephenson.
He passed away at the age of 87 after a lifetime of campaigning for equality.
Mr. Paul Stephenson, for services to equal opportunities and community relations in Bristol.
His achievements were recognised by the Queen, and he was showered with honours, including a doctorate. In 1963, Bristol buses were run by the council, who, egged on by the unions, operated a colour bar, which was legal at the time.
There ain't going to be enough work for the whites, let alone the blacks.
Paul Stephenson, a young social worker, led a boycott, and in 3 months the bus company crumbled.
Oh, of course, we're very pleased indeed. I think this is going to be welcomed by coloured people all over Bristol and many Bristolians who came in and gave us their sympathy.
Dr. Stephenson's stand, along with a handful of others, had won a victory that was to change Britain. And it came on the very day Martin Luther King made a speech saying, "I have a dream." Paul Stephenson had a dream too. Of course, Paul Stephenson's death is being felt very keenly by his family. He had a son and a daughter and his friends, but there have been tributes from the wider community too.
I think first and foremost, just condolences to the Stephenson family.
Vernon knew Paul Stephenson well. His father was the first black bus driver in Bristol after the boycott was lifted.
It's a sad loss for them, it's a sad loss for us all really, but I think it's a remarkable legacy that he's left, and in that sense I think we should recognise Julie and build on what he's done.
That legacy, he says, is now everyone's responsibility.
We should really celebrate his courage, but also recognise he was an ordinary man who wanted to make change. He wasn't just willing to leave it into the hands of elected officials alone. He wanted to do his bit. And I think it's really important that we build on that we can all be activists.
Paul's activism was well recognised. He was immortalised in Bristol's street art and given the freedom of the city. His family said he was a true pioneer in the civil rights movement, who had a profound impact on our community and our nation. They said his spirit and his impact will live on.
It's a sad day, in truth, in terms of the passing of not just one of Bristol's legends and finest sons, but also Britain's.
Roger Griffith is a writer and activist heavily influenced by the 60s.
So this city is centred on race and injustice. People like Paul, who told me the stories, who saw the potential in me and helped and mentored me in so many ways.
It wasn't an easy fight for Paul's generation to take on.
This is like apartheid now is in South Africa, or what it was in the Deep South. That blacks and dogs need not apply.
But it was worth it.
Bristol without racism would be a paradise. If we don't stand up to it, it will engulf us all.
Paul Stephenson, remembered by all as a man who changed the city he loved for the better. Dickon Hooper, BBC Points West.
He was an ordinary man, yes, but he was extraordinary too. But why would a brief protest on the buses, which lasted, 60 days, 60 years ago, matter today? Paul Baltrop explains.
His actions in the West helped change laws in Westminster. Last year, a commemorative bus drove to Parliament. On board, some of those involved in the boycott 60 years earlier. Former MP Thangham Debonair helped organise it.
He saw the path ahead and he saw that it was difficult and he saw that it was going to mean really tough times for the people involved, but he knew that his cause was just and right. He knew how to articulate it. And he carried on being a trailblazer in the sense that the young people who came on that new Bristol bus last autumn to commemorate his work, they could see that the work that he'd done had led to them being able to play a fuller part in society, in the city, in the country in which they live.
When they went inside that day, the Bristol group saw what the boycott helped bring: Britain's first Race Relations Act. Many politicians came to meet them, including our now Prime Minister, who today paid tribute.
They were inspiring in terms of the campaign that they carried out. They changed not just Bristol, but part of our own history. So I sat down with them not so long ago and had a long talk with them about what the campaign was like. So it's very sad to see this particular passing.
Historian Edson Burton believes Paul Stephenson was also influential in changing public attitudes.
By being able to put that stake in the ground and be part of an important catalyst for that Discrimination Act, actually our social attitudes have fallen in behind. And it's not actually, no longer is it legal, but also now it's not, in a sense, part of British values and part of our legal framework to discriminate.
In 1999, Government Minister Paul Boateng appeared alongside Paul Stephenson in Bristol. They worked closely together on many campaigns.
Well, Paul Stephenson was perhaps the greatest civil rights campaigner of his generation. By the time he died, a black woman had just become leader of the Conservative Party, and that's the span of Paul Stevenson's achievement. You know, we have a saying in Africa, when someone of Paul's stature dies, a mighty tree has fallen. And in Paul's case, that's true. He was a mighty tree, and we'll miss him enormously.
To get a tribute from the Prime Minister is pretty extraordinary. And a lot of people have turned up here at Shed in Bristol to pay their own tributes, people who knew him. Let's start with you, Jules, if we can. You're a race relations campaigner, and you were with him almost at the end.
Yeah, well, the night before Friday night, I went to visit him quite late and read to him and learned more about him as I was reading about him to him as well. And he woke up whilst I was reading to him, and so that felt quite special because I know, you know, he was nearing the end, it was a memorable moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, you're continuing the work that he started here. What did he mean to you?
Everything. You know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and his were broad and sturdy, and everybody here and outside of this room stand on his shoulders. And, you know, all I can hope is that the little piece that I'm adding to is moving things along, but he laid the foundations. Okay. There's a blueprint there, so yeah.
Let's talk to Joyce. Good evening to you. Good evening. So what was your involvement? When did you first become influenced by him?
First of all, I'll say that it is with great sadness that to hear about the passing of Paul, and to, on behalf of me and my family, we offer our condolences to Paul Stephenson's family. I got involved with Paul during the time I was at school. He was a teacher, English teacher at Baptist Mills School, where I was a student, and I was also a member of Baptist Mills Youth Club. And that's how I became involved with him. And I was inspired by him to become an activist and a youth worker.
And what about the bus boycott? What was your part?
My part in the bus boycott was that I actually did a couple of marches. It was an overwhelming experience for someone my age. I was frightened yet excited that I was able to do something like that.
Why were you frightened?
frightened of the teddy boys, and because of my age and being a woman.
Really?
So, yeah, because they were always out looking for a fight. I wouldn't have known what to do. My mum, I suppose, was having kittens because she herself couldn't turn up at the time because of...
But despite that, you went on the boycott and you didn't get on those buses.
Yeah, I went on the boycott, and at times we walked, and that was a way of saying that, you know, people should be accepted for who they are and not just the colour of their skin.
Thank you. Barbara, you're a close friend. How did you get to know Paul?
I first got involved in knowing Paul through the bus boycott. I was walking along and there was a demonstration, black people demonstrating. So I asked what it was all about, and they said it was about the buses not employing black people. And so I said, well, I'm there with you, and I haven't left. And Paul and his wife, you know, we got on very well together. You know, I look forward to the postcards. I can put money on my Christmas card arriving on the 1st of December every year.
But you helped to change history.
I suppose I did. Yes, I did.
Well
very
done.
much so.
I'm so sorry for your loss as well. I know you feel this very deeply.
Very much so, because I got the message bright and early yesterday morning. I was sat in Barcelona airport waiting to come back home.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you all, to all of you who've come here this evening. I'll be back with more tributes later in the programme. I've also got an interesting story about the day they tried to chuck Paul Stephenson out of a pub and what that led to. And we have a beautiful segment for you. We'll be hearing from a gospel choir paying their own musical tribute to Paul Stephenson. That's later, but now the rest of the day's news from Liz.
Now let's rejoin David. He's at the M Shed in Bristol this evening as we mark the passing of Dr. Paul Stephenson. David.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Liz. Welcome back. I wonder if I was ever on this bus that went into service in 1966. I told you that I'd let you know about a couple of anecdotes about Paul Stephenson, and the one I think is my favourite. In 1964, he went into a pub. It was called the Bay Horse Pub, just across the road in Broadmead now. He asked for a drink. Now, the barman brought him a beer. The bar manager then came up and said, you can't drink that here, we don't serve black people, and he told him to leave. Paul Stephenson refused. The cops were called, 8 police officers turned up at the pub and kicked him out. Now, it went to court because he'd been told to leave licensed premises and he didn't. Went to a magistrate's court. There was a 5-day trial. There was a lot of publicity. And he won the case. That the magistrates didn't believe that he'd been aggressive. He won the case. But the publicity was such that Harold Wilson, who was the leader of the Labour Party at the time, soon to be Prime Minister, wrote to him and said, this cannot happen anymore. We cannot have this sort of discrimination in our country. So that one act, by refusing to leave a pub, also helped to change the history of race relations in this country. Very small thing to do, but my goodness, what a big effect it had. Another thing to tell you that for some reason, I'm not quite sure, but he made friends with Muhammad Ali. The amazing boxer at the height of his fame in the 1960s. They became chums, and on at least one occasion here, Paul invited him to a school, and you can imagine the reaction when Muhammad Ali turned up at assembly. Apparently the kids went wild. It was a story that Paul Stephenson liked to tell. Okay, well, let's get on this bus and meet a special passenger. This is the Lord Lieutenant of Bristol, and also some of the people who have come to pay tributes. Thank you so much for joining us. What are your reflections on the life of Paul Stephenson?
Well, Paul was a leader. He was a true leader. And I think that was aided by his career in the RAF, by his career as a youth leader, by his ability to listen to the stories that people were saying about discrimination. And it was one of those things where He fought against racial discrimination and injustice right throughout his life.
And how things have changed since 1963, when you wouldn't have been allowed to work on the buses. It's amazing.
Well, it is. It is absolutely amazing. And it was very wise of Paul not just to take the bus company to task, but also to take the union to task. That was something that people would not have expected, but a leader does those things. And I think in terms of creating the type of community that we have, certainly the King values community and all of the things that bring people together and to help us excel and exceed. And Paul, in doing that, is a true leader.
Thank you so much, and you're a leader, of course, now. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's return now to the studio and Ian, who has the weather.
The large numbers of public houses in those days weren't serving black people. And I felt when I was being told to get out because I was black, I felt that's not on. And so I stayed. Now, in fact, when I was arrested, when the police came to arrest me, I was surprised to find that about 15 police officers, a Land Rover and a couple of dogs. Of course, I went through an enormous ordeal, the emotional ordeal of being locked up, and there's a young Irishman in that public house who came, I didn't know, but came to give evidence to the police station to say that I hadn't done anything really bad, and they told him to go away.
Well, what about the court case and the result itself? How did you feel?
Well, I felt very terrible going through the actual trial, because everything there was, as you know, it was front page headlines, it was a national issue, and I felt very much alone on that. I was delighted when the magistrates said, "We find you not guilty of these charges, Stephenson. You're free to leave this court, and also we're going to offer you 15 guineas costs against the police for bringing this charge in the first place." I thought that was excellent, because it really did show that the magistrates saw clearly that my case was just, and the police and the licensee at that time had not got their facts correct. Also, more importantly, it gave the Wilson government the even greater spur under the then Home Secretary Roy Jenkins to legislate, and they did a few months later. They were already considering it anyhow, but I think that gave them that equal spur to legislate, and the first Race Relations Act was made in 1965, and the first thing they did was to make discrimination in public houses, racial discrimination in public houses, illegal.
As we approach the end of Black History Month, groups have paid tribute to the Bristol civil rights campaigner Paul Stephenson. In 1964, Paul staged a one-man sit-in at the Bay Horse pub to challenge its racist colour bar policy. Well, earlier this month, people gathered at that same pub, including Paul's daughter, for a mass sit-in paying homage to him.
60 years ago, if you lived in Bristol and weren't white, you would be barred from working on the city's buses. The discriminatory policy sparked a boycott of the Bristol Bus Company, and the campaign for civil and employment rights led to the Race Relations Act of 1965. No longer could someone be denied a job because of the colour of their skin. Today, the achievements of the Bristol campaigners are being celebrated with posters at bus stops around the city. And here are some of the people who designed them.
Hello, I'm Martha. I'm from Bristol, and my design was about thanking the Bristol Bus Boycott for changing history, because it would be horrific if it was still like that today.
At the time, it was dodging bullets on a battlefield. It was coming at us left, right, and centre. We've come a long way. We've done a lot, and we've educated people in many ways. We've broken down barriers. People have learned to see people for who they actually are and not for the colour of their skin.
My name's Amara Lawrence, I'm from Birmingham. My design depicts children playing with the Bristol Bus Boycott toys and a little bus, and it's to show how children learn through play and we can explore these histories without creating secondary trauma.
My name's Graham Balmer, I'm from Wales. I made my design very bright and dynamic because I wanted to emphasise the celebration of the 60th anniversary. I think it's really important to celebrate the achievements that can come from coming together as a community and standing up to oppression and discrimination.
It's 60 years now since Paul Stephenson walked into this Bay Horse pub, ordered a pint, sat down, and then refused to leave. What he and many other brave men and women did back then really did change our world.
It's Black History Month, and this year the theme is reclaiming narratives. Jules Davis, a race relations campaigner in Bristol, joins me to talk more about this. Very good morning to you. Reclaiming narratives, what does that mean?
I mean, it's very straightforward. It's about, in our words, from our perspectives, and owning our stories. And it's a story that's incredible, you know, that goes back thousands of years. You know, it's worth celebrating, it's worth commemorating, and that's the narrative that we want to be owning.
How do you assess race relations here in the West Country? I'm talking particularly perhaps about Bristol, your area of expertise at the moment.
Well, you know, Bristol is, by many standards and reports, is said to be, you know, one of the best cities to live, work, play in. But actually, if you're me, you know, a black man, born and bred in Bristol, actually I've got more chance of going to prison than I do to university. And it's actually the 7th worst city for people of colour to live in the UK. So in that sense, you know, if it's a report card, must do, has to do better. And actually that then leads me to the work that I'm doing and, you know, looking to transform Bristol from the 7th worst actually into the best city for people of all colours, all cultures and all class. And we've been doing that with a piece of work called the Bristol Bus Boycott 360.
I mean, I'm a Bristolian, you're a Bristolian, so, you know, we should have lots in common.
Absolutely.
But you're saying your road is more difficult perhaps than mine might have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a real shame for us to be saying, you know, in 21st century Britain, you know, the 7th richest country in the world, Bristol, one of the best cities to live in, which therefore makes Bristol one of the best cities in the world by those standards. And so it's such a shame that we're not actually living by Martin Luther King's dream, judging people on the content of their character, not
yeah, absolutely. Who are your heroes in Bristol?
Oh, well, Paul Stephenson. We stand on the shoulders of, you know, giants, and Paul's are, you know, broad, and I stand on them, many others stand on them.
He's the Bristol Bus Boycott.
That's right, that's right. He's one of the leaders of the Bristol Bus Boycott, and it was his dream. He was inspired by Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. He stood up, you know, he led a Bristol Bus Boycott that defeated the colour bar on the same day, actually, that Martin Luther King had a dream. And what's not to be inspired by a man that's actually the first black freeman of the city? You know, he's got doctorates by both universities. He's got trains named after him. He's a Pride of Britain Honorary Lifetime Achievement Awardee. I mean, those are the type of shoulders that I'm blessed to stand on.
Let's go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Back to the beginning. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Just take us back to the Bristol Bus Boycott of 1963 and what happened there and how that led to change and how that linked in with Martin Luther King.
Well, I mean, you had some brave men and women, Paul Stephenson, Owen Henry, Audley Evans, Roy Hackett, Barbara Detrin, you know, gathered together to challenge what was systemic racism that came out of the Bristol Omnibus Company at the time. They challenged it. It was a David and Goliath battle. They won it. And as a result of their victory on the day that Martin Luther King had a dream, they defeated the colour bar. And I think that's a beautiful story that we can tell as a city. And I don't think there are many cities that can actually speak that truth in terms of being inspired by Rosa Parks, you know, a bus boycott, you know, and on the day that we defeated the colour bar, Martin Luther King had a dream. I mean, what other city could possibly say that? And in fact, we look look at someone like Marvin Rees, you know, he stands on the shoulders of giants because of that bravery that came before.
Tributes have been paid to Dr. Paul Stephenson, one of the region's greatest civil rights campaigners, following his death at the weekend.
Dr. Stephenson was a leading figure during the Bristol Bus Boycott of 1963 and helped pave the way for the first Race Relations Act. Sam Blackledge reports.
He's been described as a pioneer, an inspiration, a legend. Paul Stephenson, who died on Saturday at the age of 87, is one of the most significant figures in Bristol's history. In 1963, Stephenson spearheaded the city's bus boycott, rallying thousands to stand against the Bristol Omnibus Company's refusal to hire black or Asian drivers and conductors. The campaign was successful and paved the way for the nation's first Race Relations Act. The following year, he staged a sit-in at the Bay Horse pub, having been refused service. He was arrested, but the charges were dismissed. Eloquent, approachable, and not afraid to speak out, Stephenson worked to bring communities together and fight prejudice and injustice.
They have, in fact, projected an image to the Bristolian worker that the black man is a bogeyman. He is out to get you out of a job.
Over the years, Stephenson received many honours for his work on civil rights. In 2007, he was awarded the Freedom of the City of Bristol. There were plaques to unveil, speeches to deliver, an OBE, honorary degrees, a Pride of Britain award. Great Western Rail even named a train after him. But Stephenson's family say his greatest gift was his unwavering commitment and tireless activism.
It's not a job that's done. It's not a job that's finished. It's something that still continues to this day. He laid the foundation work for that. He continued to do that work. It didn't finish with just doing the boycott. He continued throughout the years to advocate for those who did not have that equality.
I see Paul as a magnificent person, if you can sum things up in one word. He was a godsend for young black teenagers in Bristol.
Paul Stephenson leaves behind a legacy which will be felt for many years to come throughout Bristol and beyond.
They came on a Bristol bus that 60 years ago they couldn't have worked on. The company and today Parliament now honour those who organised the boycott.
The Bristol Bus Boycott is one of the biggest achievements in overcoming injustice in this country. I speak for the whole Labour Party and the whole Labour movement in expressing our gratitude to you for what you achieved.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government will govern in service to the country. My government's legislative programme will be mission-led and based upon the principles of security, fairness and opportunity for all. Legislation on race equality will be published in draft to enshrine the full right to equal pay in law.
Now, we've been promising you a musical tribute to Paul Stephenson, and earlier the Renewal Choir, a gospel choir, came here to M Shed, and they sang something strong inside the words I know would have appealed to Paul Stephenson.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The further you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause something inside
inside so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Though you're doing me wrong. Though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. But then my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong.
Isn't that beautiful? My thanks to them. If you're thinking this is ancient history, you're wrong. This is the Bristol that I was born into. I was 4 years old in 1963. How far we've come, how much there is to do. From all of us here, bye-bye.
Let me walk for a second away from this room and just walk for a second. Hold on, you really thought I never overheard the convos while you turned me away? You should feel ashamed, cause when I call up hack it, you won't hack it. When we protest, you won't make a small change, major change. Can't complain, it's like the law of attraction. Attract our people, we ride through the pain. Make these people actually listen, the start of the change. Put us in a picture frame, as history will change. Who thought it'll never be the same? Who thought it'll never be the same?